Ethan Cole tasted blood before he knew he'd been hit. The copper shock blooming across his tongue as a boot slammed the gas station door and a gloved fist grazed his cheekbone. And in that bright flash of pain, he remembered his father's voice telling him to breathe, to see everything, to choose calm over fury. Because survival starts in the mind long before the first blow ever lands. The afternoon heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt. The scent of gasoline mixing with fryer grease and hot rubber, and 4 bikes idled like growling animals under a sun that made every chrome edge look like a blade. Their riders had rolled in a moment earlier with the casual arrogance of men who never heard the word no. Men who saw a skinny teenager at a register and thought the world would fold for them the way small towns often do when trouble wears leather and dead eyes. Ethan kept his hands low and open, one on the counter near the lottery scratchers, the other hovering over the scanner he'd been using to ring up coolant and beef jerky for a trucker who now stood frozen, a ghost of a man wishing himself invisible. The lead biker with a wolf skull patch on his vest leaned in so close, Ethan could see the yellow lines in his irises and smell the old whiskey in his breath as he said it wasn't about the money. It was about respect. It was about the way the kid had looked at them when they parked, like he was measuring them, like he thought he was better. Ethan's first impulse was to apologize, and that almost made him laugh because apologizing to men like this only feeds their hunger. And his father had taught him that mercy is a gift you give after you've taken away the power to harm, never before. Never to predators who mistake kindness for weakness. He swallowed the blood and shifted his feet a half-inch so slight nobody saw it. A small adjustment that put his weight where it needed to be if he had to move, if he had to turn the narrow aisle of chips and windshield wipes into a favorable terrain. He heard the rattle of a freezer door as the youngest biker yanked out a soda, saw a tattoo that crawled up a forearm like barbed wire, felt the store grow smaller as their bodies filled it, and in that tightening space he felt the familiar unwelcome rise of heat in his chest. The grief that lived there like a coiled wire since the day a folded flag came home in place of his father. The ache had teeth, and today those teeth wanted to bite. His mother had begged him not to work this shift. Not after the late-night calls from collection agencies and the worry about the rent. Not after the anonymous note that said "Leave town" scrawled across their door in red marker last week. But he'd told her it would be fine and had smiled the way sons do when they don't want to burden the person who has already carried too much. And now he watched the lead biker tap the counter with 2 fingers like a metronome of impatience, and wondered how quickly the day had unraveled into something that felt like a test he hadn't agreed to take. The biker asked his name, and Ethan said it quietly, and the man repeated it slowly as if tasting it, then reached across and took the lanyard with the employee badge as though claiming a trophy, and when it snapped free and the trucker flinched, Ethan saw another customer by the coffee station raise a phone halfway, and then decide against it. The courage evaporating as fast as steam rising from the burner. He wanted to end this efficiently, to dismantle the threat the way he had been taught. A wrist turned just so, a knee angled an inch inward, a heel driven to an exact place where nerves scream and bones reconsider their purpose. But his father's rule pulsed harder than the grief. Do not start the fight unless there is no other choice, because winning the wrong fight can cost you more than losing the right one. So he inhaled, pulled the cold of the store into his lungs, and angled his chin toward the security camera on the ceiling. Because witnesses matter even when justice forgets you. Then he said he didn't want trouble, and the leader smiled in a way that said trouble had already decided it wanted him. Outside, the engines coughed and settled, flies droned over a cracked windshield in the service bay, and a siren wailed somewhere far away where help lives for other people. The youngest biker shook the soda and sprayed the aisle in a sticky fountain while the big one with a snake tattoo on his neck knocked a display of air fresheners to the floor, and the skull patch leader plucked a quarter from the tip jar and balanced it on its edge, telling Ethan that respect is earned and today the lesson would be paid with interest. Ethan felt the moment turning, that fragile hinge between humiliation and harm, and he tilted it back with a sentence he delivered like a measured dose of medicine, saying he understood, saying he had no quarrel, saying they could take what they wanted from the snacks but not from the register, because the owner would press charges, and the police did still come when called for theft. And as he spoke, he kept his voice steady. A rope across a cliff. The leader studied him, head tilted, then laughed low and said they weren't thieves. They were guests reminding a town how to show hospitality, and with that he flicked the quarter so it spun and danced and fell. A cheap coin declaring the rules of a game Ethan did not intend to play. And finally, as if the scene had bored him, the leader palmed Ethan's badge. winked and led his men out, boots clomping, chimes jangling, engines snarling to life with a promise in their noise. When the door closed and the glass stopped humming and the trucker hurried out without his change, Ethan stood very still and counted 8 heartbeats, and then 10, and then he told the owner what happened, and the owner nodded and said these fellows blow through sometimes, and that it's better to let them posture and pass. And Ethan nodded back because this is what people do in towns that prefer peace even when peace looks like surrender. He cleaned the counter and restocked the air fresheners and wiped soda from the aisle, and didn't tell anyone that his hands were trembling because they weren't from fear, not exactly, but from holding back a part of himself that wanted out. The part trained to finish what others start and to end threats with clinical precision. He locked that part away again and biked home at dusk with the smell of rain in the air, and the sound of approaching thunder that wasn't weather. Their house sat behind a line of cottonwoods by the river, small and proud and bruised by unpaid bills, and his mother stood at the sink when he walked in. And he kissed her temple and said the shift was fine, and she smiled a tired smile, and told him she knew he would keep them safe. And he looked at her soft hands and the faint scar on her wrist from a life that had already required too much courage. And in that look he made another promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Night fell like a heavy curtain and rain began to drum, and he tried to read and failed and tried to sleep and failed. And the engines arrived just past midnight. 4 of them, then 6, circling once before fading into the distance. And when he walked outside at dawn, he found the garage door spray-painted with a message that bled down like a wound, and the living room window shattered with a rock wrapped in his stolen badge, and the paper around it said, "We'll see you again, kid." And the shock set not in his stomach or his fists, but in his heart, where something old and disciplined woke up. The rock had left a clean circle in the glass, a perfect reminder that precision often hides inside cruelty. Ethan stared at it longer than he meant to, the morning air cold against the cut on his cheek, the silence broken only by the slow trickle of water from the gutter. His mother's voice came soft from the doorway, trembling at the edges, asking who could have done it, but they both knew. She told him to let it go, that small towns have their monsters and they pass eventually. But Ethan heard something new in her tone, fear dressed as patience, and that made his stomach tighten like wire. By noon, the town had heard the story. The same bikers who'd swaggered into the gas station were now a rumor spreading through every porch and diner booth. People spoke in lowered voices, shaking their heads as if sympathy could be traded for safety. But Ethan saw the truth behind their silence. No one wanted to get involved. They'd learned long ago that when the Reapers marked someone, you stepped aside and pretended you didn't see. At the diner, Ethan sat by the window, his coffee gone cold, watching the street. Across the lot, 3 of the bikers leaned against their Harleys, smoke curling around their faces like ghosts. The leader, Rex, tilted his chin up slightly, just enough for Ethan to know the message was personal now. He had his badge hanging from his mirror, spinning slowly in the sunlight like a trophy. Ethan's jaw clenched, and for a moment the room blurred. Then he remembered his father's voice. Anger is a spark. Use it wrong and it burns you first. When he stepped outside, the smell of motor oil and cigarettes hit him. "You're following us, boy?" one of the bikers sneered. Ethan didn't answer. He walked past them, slow and steady, and that seemed to amuse them more than defy them. "Hey," Rex called, his tone almost friendly. "Your old man was a soldier, right? Shame he ain't around to teach you some manners." The words sliced deeper than fists ever could. Ethan turned, calm on the outside but trembling underneath, and said, "You don't know anything about him." Rex grinned. "Oh, I know plenty." His voice dropped to a hiss. "He trained killers. Made boys think they were heroes till they came home broken. Guess the apple didn't fall far." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Pain, disbelief, then something harder. "You served with him?" he asked. But Rex only smirked, revving his bike once before spitting gravel and smoke in Ethan's direction. That night, the rain returned, thick and cold. Ethan couldn't sleep. Every sound outside, every creak, every gust felt like a warning. Around midnight, the power flickered. He looked through the window and saw movement near the driveway. For a heartbeat, he froze, the ghost of his father's voice in his head. "When fear comes, breathe once. Then act." He grabbed the baseball bat from under his bed and crept to the door. The porch light flickered again, revealing a silhouette by the fence. He stepped outside barefoot on the wet boards, rain slapping his shoulders, but when lightning flashed, the figure was gone. Only the sound of engines fading into the night remained. The next morning, the garage door was tagged again. This time, a crude skull with the word "soon" scrawled beneath it. His mother wanted to call the police, but the local sheriff, a weary man with bags under his eyes, only sighed when he came. "We've had trouble with that crew before," he said, scribbling in his notebook. "The best thing you can do is lay low. Don't provoke them. Provoke them," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "They came to us." The sheriff looked away. "I know, son. But some fires burn hotter when you fight the wind." After he left, Ethan walked to the river bank where he used to fish with his father. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the memory came sharp. The day his father taught him to control pain, to turn it into focus. "The body remembers fear, Ethan," his father had said, "but discipline teaches it who's in charge." Ethan closed his eyes and breathed. He didn't want revenge, not yet. He wanted understanding. Why had Rex known his father's name? Why speak with such venom? When he returned home, the phone was ringing. His mother answered, and her face drained of color. "They said," she whispered, "if you don't meet them tonight at the old quarry, they'll come here instead." Ethan took the receiver from her hand and said nothing, just listened to the faint laughter on the other end before the line went dead. His heartbeat slowed, not sped up. There was no panic, only clarity. The quiet before a storm found its center. He walked to his father's old chest in the closet, the one his mother had kept locked since the funeral. The key still hung on its hook. Inside lay a folded flag, a photo of two soldiers smiling in desert sun, and a dog tag with the name Rex Morgan etched beside his father's. The first twist hit him like ice water. The man who'd taunted him wasn't a stranger. He'd once fought beside his father. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. It was personal, old, and unfinished. As thunder rolled outside, Ethan touched the cold metal of both dog tags and whispered, "Dad, I think your war just came home." The storm didn't end that night, it changed shape. It moved inside Ethan, quiet and deliberate, like a tide creeping up ashore when nobody's watching. The discovery of Rex Morgan's name beside his father's was more than a twist of fate. It was a warning written in metal, a whisper from the past that said nothing you believed was ever the whole truth. He sat on the floor beside the open chest, the smell of old leather and oil filling the room, and stared at the two dog tags until dawn slipped through the curtains. His mother had fallen asleep in the living room chair, an empty teacup beside her, and he knew he couldn't tell her. Not yet. She'd spent years trying to bury the war along with the man who'd fought it. When the morning came, Ethan rode his bike out to the edge of town where the old training fields used to be, a wide stretch of gravel and grass that the military had abandoned years ago. He hadn't been there since he was a child, but the memories came flooding back. His father's hands guiding his stance, the sound of his voice echoing across the open field, teaching him how to disarm, how to read an enemy, how to stay 1 second ahead. The world doesn't give fair fights, son. It gives choices. Make the one that leaves you standing. Ethan closed his eyes and breathed until he could hear that voice again, not as a memory, but as a command. He began training with a precision that scared even him. The punches came faster, sharper, cleaner than they had in years. Every movement carried the echo of purpose. Sweat stung his cut cheek, the pain grounding him in a way that felt almost holy. The rhythm steadied his heart. He was no longer just a scared boy defending his home. He was his father's student again, a weapon forged in quiet patience. By the third day, he'd learned to move without thinking. The town carried on as if nothing was wrong. Kids went to school, old men played cards outside the hardware store. But beneath that calm, whispers were spreading. The reapers were seen near the old quarry again. People locked their doors earlier. The gas station owner told Ethan in a hushed voice that he'd heard Rex was looking for someone who owed him blood. That night, as rain streaked the windows, Ethan's mother sat at the kitchen table with an unopened letter. Her fingers trembled around it. "This came today," she said quietly. "It's from Fort Blackwell." Ethan frowned, the base where his father had served before his final deployment. The envelope was thick, sealed with an official stamp. She hesitated before handing it over. "I think you should read it." The letter was written by a retired sergeant named William Kane. The words were careful, heavy. He explained that years ago, during a covert mission, Ethan's father and Rex Morgan had served together. The operation had gone wrong, classified details withheld, But the report claimed Rex disobeyed orders, leading to civilian casualties. Ethan's father had testified against him, ending Rex's career and sending him into dishonor. Kane wrote that Rex had sworn revenge on the Cole family. He said he'd take from your father what your father took from him, his name, his pride, his life. Ethan felt his throat close. His father hadn't died in an accident overseas, as his mother had always said. The report hinted at an ambush during a return mission. Coordinates classified, but Kane's final line burned through the paper. If Morgan's still alive, he knows the truth, and he'll come for it. His mother's eyes filled as she watched him read. I didn't tell you because I thought it was over, she whispered. I thought keeping you away from that world would keep you safe. Ethan folded the letter carefully. He didn't just come for me, he said.
He came for us both.
The next few nights were uneasy, the air thick with something that felt like waiting. Ethan checked locks twice, watched headlights on the road too long, memorized the sound of every creak in the house. But then, on the fifth night, a sound came. That didn't belong. The low thud of boots on the porch followed by the squeak of the screen door. He turned off the light and reached for the bat again, but when he opened the door, nobody was there. Only a small envelope taped to the railing, wet from rain. Inside was a single Polaroid, blurry, taken in low light. It showed his mother at the grocery store earlier that day, smiling politely at the cashier. On the back in thick black ink were 3 words. He lied too. Ethan's pulse hammered. Who he was wasn't the question. The question was what his father had lied about. He turned the photo over again, searching for meaning, and noticed something faint in the corner, a number scratched into the image itself. 12/07/09. A date. The day his father's mission ended. The day they said he'd died. He spent hours cross-referencing everything he could find online about that mission, but most records were sealed. What little he found hinted at something darker. A cover-up involving illegal arms transfers, private contracts, betrayal within their own unit. His father hadn't just testified against Rex. He'd exposed something bigger. Something people still wanted buried. By sunrise, Ethan knew 2 things for certain. Rex wasn't just seeking vengeance. He was silencing history. And his father, the man he'd idolized his whole life, might have been hiding a truth that could burn them both. As the morning light hit the river outside, Ethan closed his laptop and whispered to himself, They think I'm just a kid. They don't know I'm his son. The reflection staring back at him in the glass looked older now, calmer, sharper, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with fists. For the first time since the bikers arrived, he smiled, not out of confidence but clarity. Every secret had a cost, and tonight he planned to start collecting. The night the town lost power, the sky burned purple over the horizon, thunder grumbling. Like a promise, and somewhere in that electric darkness, Ethan understood that nothing about this was random anymore. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one gathering in him. He had spent the day tracing every name and connection from that old military letter, but what he found only deepened the riddle. Rex Morgan's dishonor wasn't the end of, and 3 other soldiers from the same unit had also vanished within a year of Ethan's father's death. 2 accidents, 1 suicide. All buried beneath vague reports stamped classified. When the first lightning strike hit, the house lights flickered and died, leaving him in silence thick enough to feel. His mother called his name from the hallway, her voice thin with worry. Before he could answer, the front window exploded inward. Glass rained across the living room like ice shards. Headlights blazed outside, their sharp white beams slicing through rain. And in the center of them, silhouettes in leather and chains moved closer. The Reapers had come back. Ethan's instincts took over before his fear could catch up. He pulled his mother toward the kitchen, whispering for her to stay down, to get to the basement. The roar of engines drowned out her sobs. The front door slammed open, boots pounding wood, laughter echoing in the dark. "Come out, soldier boy," a voice shouted, Rex's voice rough, cruel, almost gleeful. "Let's finish your daddy's lesson." Ethan slipped through the back hall, the rain masking his steps. His father's lessons came back like muscle, Memory. Never confront in open light. Always control the angle and use silence as your ally. He grabbed the heavy wrench from the tool bench, steadying his breath. Two bikers entered the kitchen, flashlights cutting through the dark, sweeping past the fridge and pantry. Ethan waited until the beam crossed the sink, then moved. The fight lasted seconds but felt eternal. A flash of motion, a grunt, a crash. One man went down without a sound, the other turned too late. The wrench cracked against bone, the sound sickening, the silence after it worse. Ethan stood over them, shaking, not from guilt but from recognition. He had done exactly what his father had trained him for, what he swore he'd never do again. He dragged them to the hallway and locked the back door just as another engine cut off outside. Rex's voice came through the shattered window again, calm and cold. "That's my crew you're lying to rest in there, boy. Your old man taught you well. Guess he didn't tell you what he did to me." The words froze Ethan mid-step. The rain softened, like even the sky wanted to hear. "What are you talking about?" he shouted back. Rex laughed, that same low, bitter sound. "You think your dad was the hero? He wasn't. He left us out there to die so he could walk away clean. 5 of us, stripped of rank, branded as criminals while he came home to medals. Your father made a deal, kid. He traded blood for glory." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "You're lying," he said, but the confidence in his voice cracked halfway. "He would never—" "Oh, he did," Rex interrupted, stepping into the flickering glow of a burning headlight. "And the proof's right where he left it. That chest of his looks deeper under the false bottom. You'll find out what kind of man you're avenging." Then he was gone. Engines roared again, fading into the rain-soaked distance, leaving silence so heavy it pressed against the walls. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed to his father's chest, pulled everything out, the flag, the manual, the medals, until his fingers found the lip of wood that didn't belong. Beneath it lay an envelope sealed with wax. He tore it open. Inside were a handful of grainy photos taken in a war zone, civilians lying in dust, soldiers turning away. His father's face was in one of them, half-shadowed, expression unreadable. On the back of the last photo were 3 words in his father's handwriting. "Forgive me, son." Ethan sank to the floor, his chest tightening until he could barely breathe. The truth was worse than he imagined. His father had covered up something horrific. Maybe to protect his unit, maybe to protect the country, but at the cost of lives, at the cost of his own soul. The boy who'd worshipped him suddenly didn't know who he was fighting for. By dawn, the house was surrounded by flashing blue lights. The sheriff stood on the porch, staring at the unconscious bikers. "Self-defense," he said quietly, but his eyes carried something else. Fear. "You should leave town for a while, son. They'll come back, and next time they won't just scare you." Ethan nodded but said nothing. As the ambulance pulled away, he looked at the photos again, the rain smearing ink like tears. He couldn't tell his mother, not yet. Not until he understood everything. That night, he returned to the riverbank where his father had once taught him to track the current. The moonlight shimmered across the water, turning the world silver and unreal. He held the photo under the light, studying the background, half a burned truck, a sign in Arabic barely visible. It matched the location coordinates from the mission file he'd found online. Fort Blackwell had lied about where his father died. Behind him, a branch snapped. He spun, but the voice that came wasn't Rex's. It was deep, steady, and older. "Your father wasn't the only one who wanted the truth buried," the stranger said, stepping out of the shadows with a limp and a military insignia on his coat. "He tried to expose them in the end. That's why they sent Rex." Ethan's breath caught. "Who are you?" The man stepped closer, rain dripping from his cap, eyes full of pity and warning. "Name's Sergeant Kane," he said quietly. "Your father didn't die overseas, son. He was executed here, on his own." And before Ethan could speak, a gunshot cracked through the trees, the flash lighting Kane's face one last time before he fell into the mud. Someone else was out there watching, the barrel still smoking. Ethan dropped beside the dying man as footsteps retreated into the forest, his hands slick with blood that wasn't his father's but felt like it could have been. Kane's last words came out as a whisper carried by the rain. Finish what he started. The proof. Quarry. Then silence. The forest swallowed the sound. Ethan looked toward the darkness, jaw clenched, a storm roaring in his veins. The past wasn't just hunting him now, it had declared war. Ethan knelt in the mud long after Sergeant Kane's breathing stopped, the rain drumming against his back like a cruel metronome. His hands shook as he pressed them against the old soldier's jacket, the warmth fading too quickly. The words, the quarry, echoed in his mind until they didn't sound like a place anymore. They sounded like destiny. Lightning split the treetops, casting a white flash across the dog tags that had fallen from Kane's hand. They weren't military issues. One belonged to Rex Morgan. The other bore Ethan's father's name, scratched out, defaced, as if someone wanted to erase him from existence. He stumbled to his feet, soaked and breathless, the storm blurring the world into streaks of light and shadow. Somewhere out there, a rifle clicked. Ethan dove behind a fallen log just as another shot shattered bark inches from his head. The shooter didn't advance. Whoever it was wanted him alive. He crawled backward through the mud, heart pounding until he reached the ridge where his bike waited. Within minutes, he was racing home through sheets of rain, every thunderclap sounding like the beat of a countdown. When he burst through the door, his mother was already awake, pale and trembling. "You're bleeding," she gasped, reaching for him. He grabbed her wrist gently. "Mom, listen to me," he said, voice trembling but urgent. "We have to leave now." "Leave?" Her voice cracked. "Ethan, what's happened?" He looked at her and saw the truth she wasn't ready for. "They killed Dad here," he said. "Not overseas. It was all a lie. And now they're trying to bury it again." She stared at him, her lips parting in disbelief, and then tears filled her eyes. "I thought keeping you away from that world would save you," she whispered. "Your father, he made me promise never to tell you. He said it would die with him. Rex was part of it," Ethan said. "And someone else, someone still in uniform. They killed Kane to keep him quiet." His mother clutched his sleeve, voice shaking. "Then we have to go to the police." "The police can't help," he said softly. "They're either scared or involved." He hesitated, then added, "Kane said the proof is at the quarry. If I find it, maybe I can end this." "No," she said firmly, her eyes burning through tears. "If you go near that place, you won't come back." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Dad didn't come back either. I have to finish this. For him, for you." He left before she could stop him. The rain had eased into mist, but the wind carried a strange quiet, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. The old quarry lay beyond the tree line, miles out of town, a scar of earth carved by machines long forgotten. As he rode, he thought of the boy he'd been a week ago, who believed that strength was silence and restraint was virtue. That boy was gone. What remained was a man built from loss and truth, sharpened by grief. When he reached the quarry, the headlights of several bikes glowed in the distance, flickering through the fog like ghostly eyes. The reapers were waiting. Ethan parked behind a mound of rock, his chest rising slow, deliberate. Every sound, the hiss of the wind, the click of a chain swinging from a hook, felt amplified. He moved quietly through the shadows, past the skeletal frames of old mining equipment, until he saw them. Rex and 4 men standing beside a fire barrel. Something metal gleamed in Rex's hand, a flash drive, small but significant. "This is what your daddy died for," Rex said to the others, his voice carrying through the wind. "Proof that the colonel sold out our unit. But instead of exposing him, your hero burned the evidence to protect himself. That's the truth his boy needs to see before I end him." Ethan's breath caught. His father protecting a traitor? It didn't make sense. But the doubt crept in anyway. He stepped out from behind the shadows and said, "Then why didn't you show it to the world, Rex? Why keep it hidden all these years?" The men spun, startled. Rex's smirk returned, slow and cruel. "Because, kid, I needed leverage. Dead men don't keep secrets, but living ones do. Your old man thought he could outsmart the system. He didn't realize I was part of it." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, circling closer. Rex flicked the flash drive in his hand like a coin. "You think I fell from grace? No, they paid me to disappear, to do the dirty work they couldn't. Every rebellion needs its monster. Your father was supposed to die quietly. He almost did, until he tried to make it right." Ethan's voice trembled. You shot him? Rex's smile thinned. No, I only watched. The man who pulled the trigger wears a badge in your town. The sheriff. The realization hit like cold steel. Ethan felt the ground sway beneath him. The sheriff's warning, his hollow sympathy. It all made sense now. Rex tossed the flash drive into the fire barrel. Flame swallowed it instantly. Now there's nothing left but you, boy, he said. A loose end. Ethan moved before the words finished leaving his mouth. He dropped low, grabbed the nearest chain, and swung it hard. The first biker went down.
Chaos erupted. Shouts, fists, the glint of knives.
The fight wasn't graceful. It was primal. Every move his father ever taught him became instinct. A punch to the throat, a kick to the knee, a pivot that sent a man crashing into the rocks. Rex came last, charging through the firelight. Their collision was brutal, a flurry of fists and rage, rain hissing against flame. You're just like him, Rex shouted, grabbing Ethan by the collar. A killer pretending to be noble. Ethan broke free, twisting his arm and driving his elbow into Rex's ribs. No, he said through clenched teeth. I'm what he hoped I'd be. They crashed together again, rolling near the cliff's edge, gravel sliding beneath them. Lightning flashed, and for a moment Ethan saw his father's reflection in the storm. The same eyes, the same will to survive. He pinned Rex, breathless and shaking, the drop yawning behind them. Rex's grin didn't fade. You think killing me ends it? The sheriff knows where you are. He's coming. You'll both die here. Ethan hesitated just long enough for Rex to reach for his blade. They struggled, the edge catching moonlight. A gunshot cracked through the air, one sharp final note, and Rex's body went limp. Ethan turned. At the ridge stood his mother, raincoat plastered to her frame, the sheriff's gun in her shaking hands. The echo of the shot rolled across the quarry like thunder that wouldn't die, and as she dropped the gun, her whisper barely carried through the storm. No one else takes my son. The sound of the gunshot lingered in the hollow of the quarry long after the rain stopped, like a bell tolling for everything they'd lost. Ethan stood frozen, breath shallow, heart thundering as Rex's body slid limp against the gravel. Smoke curled from the sheriff's revolver clutched in his mother's trembling hands. For a long moment there was only silence, broken finally by her sob, raw and deep, the sound of a soul that had carried too many secrets for too many years. She dropped the weapon and it clattered against the wet stone. Ethan ran to her, the world still spinning around them. Mom, he whispered, grabbing her shoulders. What did you do? Where did you get that gun? Her eyes were hollow, shining in the firelight from the dying barrel. It was your father's, she said softly. The sheriff gave it back after the funeral, said it was all they found. She paused, swallowing hard. I kept it because I never believed his death was an accident. I thought, maybe one day I'd need it. The sheriff's siren wailed faintly in the distance now, growing louder. Ethan turned toward the echo of tires crunching on gravel. He's coming, he said. Rex was right. His mother's gaze hardened. Then it ends tonight. All of it. Moments later, the sheriff's cruiser slid into view, headlights slicing through the mist. Sheriff Dalton stepped out slowly, his hand resting near his holster, eyes scanning the scene. The body, the fire, the blood. Well, he said, voice steady but cold. Looks like you've made a real mess, Ethan. Self-defense again? Or should I write this one up as an execution? Ethan stepped between him and his mother. You killed my father, he said. The sheriff's eyes flickered, just a fraction, but enough. Careful with your accusations, son, Dalton said. Your dad was a hero, remember? The official story says he died saving men from a raid gone wrong. You wouldn't want to ruin his reputation. Ethan's fists clenched. That's the lie you built, isn't it? You, Rex, and the colonel. My father found out about the weapons deal. How you were selling gear to private militias through his unit. He tried to expose it and you silenced him. Dalton smiled without warmth. You think you know the truth? That letter you found was bait, kid. Kane didn't tell you the whole story. Your father wasn't some innocent soldier. He was part of it from the start, until his conscience caught up. He took the payoff, then tried to undo it. But you can't buy redemption with blood. Ethan shook his head. You're lying. Dalton's voice softened almost kindly. He confessed it to me himself. Said he'd testify against us if we didn't protect his family. So we did. We staged his death. But he got scared. He was going to come clean. I couldn't let that happen. The last thing he said before I pulled the trigger was your name. The truth hit like a strike to the ribs. Ethan's knees weakened, his breath caught somewhere between rage and grief. He saw his father's smile again, the way he'd said, "Never fight unless you must." But what if his father's final choice had been another fight against himself, against guilt? Dalton drew his gun slowly, the metal gleaming under the fading lightning. "Now let's make this look clean. You attacked me after killing Rex. Tragic end to a troubled boy's story." Before he could fire, Ethan's mother stepped forward. Her voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. "You already wrote that ending once," she said. "You don't get to write it again." The sheriff turned the gun toward her, but Ethan moved faster than thought. A blur of training and instinct, his father's lessons alive in his muscles. He twisted Dalton's wrist, disarmed him, and slammed the weapon into the mud. The sheriff lunged, but Ethan didn't strike back. He held him down, every nerve screaming to end it. But another voice rose louder inside him, his father's. "Control is the greatest strength." "I'm not like you," Ethan said quietly. "And I'm not him either. I'm what he hoped I'd become." Dalton spat mud, sneering. "You think anyone will believe you?" Ethan reached into Rex's jacket and pulled out a second flash drive, the real one, the one Rex had used to bait him. He held it up. "I don't need belief," he said. "I have proof." Dalton's face was drained of color. By dawn, the police from the neighboring county arrived. The quarry was swarming with uniforms, lights, and reporters. The drive contained records of weapons transfers, coded messages, and falsified reports, all tying Dalton and several officials to the deaths of soldiers, including Ethan's father. The sheriff was arrested on the spot. As the sun climbed above the quarry, Ethan stood with his mother near the river of light running through the wet stone.
He made mistakes, she said quietly, staring into the rising glow.
"But your father died trying to make them right. Maybe this is what he wanted all along, for the truth to find its way home." Ethan nodded, the weight in his chest loosening. "He taught me to fight, but not for revenge. For peace," she smiled faintly. "Then you did exactly what he hoped you would." Days later, the town returned to its fragile calm. The gas station reopened. The whispers faded. People nodded to Ethan now with something close to respect, not pity. The boy who once stayed quiet had become the man who forced truth into daylight. On the final evening, he walked to the riverbank one last time, carrying both sets of dog tags. The water glowed gold beneath the setting sun. He knelt, whispering, "It's over, Dad." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and almost approving. He dropped the tags into the current, watching them sink and drift. 2 lives finally at rest. Then he stood, shoulders square, eyes on the horizon. The world hadn't grown safer, but he had grown steadier. The lesson his father had tried to leave him was finally clear. Not that strength means domination or that vengeance is justice, but that real power lies in knowing when to fight, when to forgive, and when to walk away whole. As the last light touched his face, Ethan turned toward home, leaving behind the quarry, the ghosts, and the boy who'd once been afraid to stand his ground. For the first time in his life, peace didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom.